legitimization of decent, radical moral simplification, political correctness that evolved into a tool of oppression. The architects of the European Union project neglected to acknowledge one crucial detail. The antithesis of the nation state will always be an empire. Even when a complex bureaucratic apparatus sits atop its pyramid rather than the emperor. At the same time, not far away, in the state of Israel, the exact opposite lesson was drawn. The conclusion was not to flee nationhood, but to solidify it, to strengthen identity, establish sovereignty, build strengths, and ensure that the Jewish nation state would be capable of defending itself against any threat or enemy. The state of Israel was the absolute opposite of the new European utopian project. The confrontation between the European Union empire and the small Jewish state was unavoidable. How dare the Jews, historically associated with cosmopolitanism, enlightenment, and European advancement, turn their back on the Enlightenment vision of post-nationalism? This question continues to illuminate even today the profound tension that persists between post-Holocaust Europe and the small Jewish state. For the architects of the European Tower of Babel, the Jewish nation state is not just a political problem. It posed an ideological threat. Its very existence challenged the foundation of their post-national atheistic and globalist worldview. Moral relativism has paralyzed the ability to distinguish between good and evil in Europe and between aggressor and victim. As a result, post-national Europe has become easy prey for takeover from within by forces that do not share its values, primarily political Islam. A notable example of this is the elimination of Holocaust education in Western Europe. In Britain, there's been a 60% drop in Holocaust instruction from 2,000 schools to 850 after October 7th, due to the pressure from pro-Palestinian Islamists backed by an academic establishment and labor unions largely dominated by the famous Red and Green Alliance. Today, it is no coincidence that the very countries that experienced communist oppression firsthand are those that understand Israel's position far better than most Western European nations. Countries such as Hungary, Czech Republic, and Poland are unwilling to hear about supranational governments. Doesn't matter if it's Moscow or Brussels, or a vision of a world without borders, because they have already lived in such an utopia and know very well how it ends. These countries quickly identify the underlying patterns of totalitarianism, even when it is no longer appears in military uniform and tanks, but in a cloaked and a pseudo-liberal language of human rights, political correctness, and European values. The memory of communist oppression is not merely historical trauma. It has become a tool for political diagnosis. It taught them that not every discourse of equality leads to freedom, that not every dismantling of borders leads to peace, and that not every universal morality is truly moral when detached from responsibility, context, and self-defense. That is why, when these nations look at Israel, they do not see a defined state or a moral anomaly, but rather a society that refuses to relinquish its sovereignty, identify, and right to defend itself, even under intense pressure. In this sense, a profound historical irony has emerged. Central and Eastern Europe, once viewed as backward compared with Western Europe, has become the region that understands better than many in the West the cost of moral relativism and the dangers of political utopias. Seemingly, everything said so far is unrelated to the war on anti-Semitism, except for this. Currently, the insidious forms of anti-Semitism are directed at denying the Jewish people's identity and collective rights, the denial of their past, our past, and historical connection to our ancestral homeland, the denial of our national identity, Zionism, and finally the denial of our rights to self-determination and to have a Jewish state, a Jewish state right to exist. To further deny our rights, the national movement of the Jewish people and the State of Israel are accused of all the West's sins. Until October 7th, we were accused of colonialism, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid. And since October 7th, we are also accused of genocide. These accusations are not made through the European Union formal leadership, but through its sophisticated bureaucratic apparatus, which allocates substantial resources to organizations such as Physicians for Human Rights, B'Tselem, etc., which produce the required campaigns and foster the toxic atmosphere that underpins the delegitimization of the State of Israel and the anti-Semitic climate within European institutions. B'Tselem, for instance, which only recently published a libelous report entitled Hell on Earth, alleging that Israel operates torture camps against Palestinians, received 400,000 euros from the European Union. Together with Breaking the Silence, Combatant for Peace, radical organization that offered cooperate with the Hague Tribunal, accuses Israel of war crimes, received 800,000 euros from the European Union. These are just two examples out of hundreds. This atmosphere is also supported by an inadequate educational infrastructure for Holocaust studies and distorted approach to history of the Middle Eastern studies. We need your help here in this room. We need your help to stop the massive industrial funding of extremist organizations that are undermining our sovereignty and work ceaselessly to tarnish our name. We need your help with education, to deepen the education of Holocaust, knowledge, at least basic knowledge of Jewish history, Middle East history, and no less important, understanding radical Islam and its true objectives. Thank you for listening. Toda rabba.
Thank you very much to Minister Shikלי, who, as I understand, has prepared a compelling and insightful two-day program for you, and thank God, great weather too. And now it is my honor to invite member of Knesset, Amir Oוחנה, the Speaker of the Knesset of Israel. Amir.
Thank you, everyone. Good morning. My dear friend and energetic Minister for Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism, Amichai Shikli, members of parliaments from around the world, senators, representatives, distinguished guests. About a century ago, a Jewish man named Ze'ev Dov was walking in Poland with his friend, a rabbi. A police officer stopped them, pulled out a blade, and cut off the rabbi's beard. At the time, Jews were expected to accept public humiliation in silence, but not Ze'ev Dov. He lifted his cane and struck the police officer. For that act of defiance, Ze'ev Dov was beaten savagely. When he finally staggered home, bruised, bloodied, and broken, his young son noticed something extraordinary. Ze'ev Dov was happy. He was happy because he had defended the honor of the Jewish people. That young boy was Menachem Begin, who would one day help forge the Jewish state and lead the state as a prime minister. Years later, not far away, behind the barbed wire of Auschwitz, a Jewish woman named Elisheva watched as an SS officer unleashed his dog on a woman who was too weak to stand. Elisheva didn't look away. In a remarkable act of bravery, she walked straight toward the Nazi officer and slapped him across the face twice. The officer drew his pistol to shoot her, but the weapon jammed. Instead, Elisheva was flogged nearly to death. Her body was dragged back to the barracks, where she lay unconscious for 9 days. When she finally opened her eyes, her first words were, "It was worth it." That slap, like Ze'ev Dov's cane, echoed across generations. It reached her great-grandson, David Zini, who rose to become one of the IDF's top commander officers, and just months ago was sworn in as head of the Shin Bet. These two Jewish heroes, Ze'ev Dov and Elisheva, couldn't have known the power of their courage or where it would lead. But they knew a truth as old as our people. Jews do not kneel nor bow. Jews do not submit. On October 7th, anti-Semitism erupted in its rawest, most ancient form. Jews were again hunted house to house, simply for being Jewish. Families were butchered. Innocent men, women, and children were dragged away into captivity. In the wake of the massacre, Jews around the world experienced an explosion of anti-Semitism. Jews were gunned down while celebrating Hanukkah in Sydney, murdered while observing Yom Kippur in Manchester, and burned alive while marching for Israeli hostages in Colorado. Synagogues have been set ablaze across continents. Being visibly Jewish, wearing a kippah or a Star of David, has become an open invitation to harassment and assault. In our day, as throughout our history, Jews have no choice but to fight. Yet that willingness, generation after generation, to rise, to fight, and to endure is why we are still here. My friends, the challenge before us is immense. Our enemies outnumber us, surround us, and pursue us relentlessly. But they do not understand the strength that has sustained us for 4,000 years. And once again, we had to fight holding the line against a 7-armed Goliath. And once again, David prevailed. Now, we stand ready to confront the battle for Jewish life wherever it rages. Our defiance today carries the same eternal message spoken by Ze'ev Dov's cane in Poland and Elisheva's slap in Auschwitz, that the Jewish people do not shrink before any foe. However, unlike a century ago, the arc of Jewish history now bends in a different direction. Today, we are not defenseless. Today, we have a state and an army sworn to protect it. Today, we are home. Winston Churchill once said, "Nations that went down fighting rose again, but those which surrendered tamely were finished." So let us, together, lean into the legacy of Ze'ev Dov, Elisheva, and the countless Jewish heroes of our history and of our time. Let us resolve, here and now, that our children will inherit not only our struggle, but our strength. Let us usher them into the long-promised Jewish future, defined not by survival, but by prosperity, security, and peace. welcome to the Knesset. Welcome to Jerusalem. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amir Oxana, the Speaker of the Knesset of Israel. It's a very busy day at the Knesset today, a budget day, I'm sure you understand. He will continue for his other engagements, of course. Amir, toda. Before we address the core issues, at the heart of the fight against anti-Semitism, I would like to invite Mr. Itai Reuveni. He is the Director of Communication at NGO Monitor to speak to us about the money trail that leads to anti-Semitism. I've learned, always look for the money. Itai, bבקשה.
Well, supposed to have a presentation, but, you know, we can do it without. Minister Amichai Shikli, distinguished Knesset guests, Parliament members, let me begin with a quote. God indeed stands above Israel's evil snares and conspiracies, and God will ultimately defeat the evil schemes of Zionism. The establishment of Israel was a relapse to the most primitive concepts of an exclusive tribal God. This quote is from the head of the NGO Sabil, received €1 million from the European Union only recently. Your taxpayer money. Only a few weeks ago, an anti-Semitic map was published in Spain, mapping Jewish businesses in Barcelona. One of the NGOs that promoted this map, I quote, collaborate and spread the word, a collective and independent research project to understand how Zionism operates. 40% of the budget of this NGO that promoted the map comes from the European Union, your taxpayer money. October 7th was nonsense. This quote is from the head of the organization Neftach. 3.5 million euros in a joint project from the EU, your taxpayer money. And there are hundreds of examples. Ladies and gentlemen, the anti-Semitic atmosphere we see today in much of the Western world did not emerge spontaneously. It has been shaped for over 2 decades, largely through a moral and legal discourse led by an NGOs that claim to promote human rights, while consistently excluding Jews from those protections. It's an NGO ecosystem that frames, we have also the quotes, as you can see on the screen. It's an NGO ecosystem that frames Israel as a state whose very existence is illegitimate. A funded effort to deny Jewish self-determination, regardless borders, context, or history. When it comes to the money trail that fuels anti-Semitism, there are, of course, many actors involved. Qatar, Iran, Palestinian Authority, Turkey, and even China. They all invest in heavily influenced operations and narrative warfare. This is not a secret. But I want to focus on the West. I want to focus specifically as a case study in Europe. Because Europe not only affected by this process, although Europe is one of our greatest allies, European governments play a central role in funding those NGOs. Our research at NGO Monitor shows that every year more than 300 million euros are spent by Western governments, including the European Union, directly and indirectly to NGOs that involved in anti-Israeli, anti-Semitic actions. In some cases, and we have it all documented, this funding is linked to organizations that connected to terrorism. Boycotts, divestments, sanctions, lawfare, double standards, terror justification, these are the tactics these NGOs employ. And the results? Anti-Semitism is whitewashed and entered the mainstream. They operate everywhere. They operate on campuses, in businesses, in your parliament, in Congress, International Criminal Court, culture, sport, social media, and beyond. Wherever you look, we can show you, black on white, how European money is fueling some of those groups. Understanding the misuse of European funds brings us to another critical issue: lack of transparency. In some states, it's almost impossible to understand the funding process. Who decides? Based on what criteria? Why the same NGOs receive money all over again, every year? And what vetting mechanisms actually exist in your countries? At times, while following the money, we encounter a slightly different phenomenon. Radical groups that are not officially funded by government money, but yet cooperating with European institutions. One example is the Hind Rajab Foundation, a Hezbollah-affiliated group that only recently collaborated with Europol, the European police, in effort to hunt Israeli soldiers. Another group is El-Haq, until 2 years ago, received funding from every big European government. It's a group that justifying October 7th. It's a group that calling to the dismantle of Israel. Only recently, El-Haq was sanctioned by the US administration and designated as a terror group by Israel. And still, El-Haq lobby freely in the European Parliament, and they are act freely in almost every European court. Another way that fuels those campaigns is through the misuse of Western money to humanitarian aid. We have seen additional funds intended for relief diverted in multiple ways into systems controlled by Hamas, or into advocacy networks that function as political warfare against the Jewish people. In some cases, the money supports physical infrastructures, and we saw that during the operation in Gaza. In others, it fuels legal and media campaigns designed to isolate and delegitimize the Jewish state internationally. A recent report exposes official Hamas documents showing how Hamas recruited operatives inside major international humanitarian organizations in Gaza in order to take control of projects and funding. The vast majority of these organizations is funded directly by Europe, Canada, Australia, and also, in some cases, the United States. For 20 years, those NGOs stayed silent. They didn't say a word about the fact that Hamas control your money, but always blamed the Jews of all wrongdoings, fueling again and again blood labels and conspiracies. Taking together this funding, you can see on the screen, those are original Hamas documents showing how they just misused every European organization or international organization that worked in Gaza. This money, this funding, whitewashed anti-Semitism. It creates a broader environment in which anti-Semitism is normalized. Attacks on Jews are given context only to the conflict. Terror is explained rather than confronted, and Jewish fear is treated as political inconvenience or merely an internal security issue. And Jewish self-defense is always framed as aggression. These well-funded narratives do not remain confined to Israel and the Middle East. the money to those NGOs return back to your home. It enters universities, media institutions, cultural spaces, and political discourse. This money eventually shapes how the Western world sees the Jews. Not as people we write in history, but as a problem. All of our research, data, and documentation are published publicly and are available for you. We do not ask decision makers around the world to agree with us. We ask them to look at the facts and to raise hard questions. When it comes to fighting anti-Semitism on the funding front and understand where your taxpayer money is going to, transparency, accountability, and serious oversight are not hostile acts. They are the foundation of the trust between allies, of the trust between the State of Israel and the West. Following the money is not about politics. It's about defending our values, protecting human rights for everyone, and ensuring that your money and your resources are not used to fuel hatred, violence, or the demonization of the Jewish people. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Itai. It seems that you, members of the European Parliament, has a lot of work to do. We will now move on to hear your perspectives and insights, distinguished speakers. At this stage of the discussion, each speaker at the table will address one of the pressing core issues. In the fight against anti-Semitism, we will focus on three central themes: legislative tools against Islamism and radical movements, Holocaust education as a key pillar in combating anti-Semitism, responses and legislation to prevent foreign political interference. Along the way, we will also raise additional related issues. Before we begin, I would like to note that each speaker is allowed 5 minutes to allow for an open discussion and exchange of ideas. You'll speak from the tables, you have microphones. We will begin with the first topic, legislative tools against Islamism and radical movements, which will be addressed by, and I hope I'll say all the names correctly, Mr. Mattias Karlsson, Member of Parliament, Sweden, the Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro, the Brazilian National Congress, Monsieur Fabrice Leggeri, Member of Patriots Group from France in the European Parliament, Mr. Pedro dos Santos Frazão, Member of Parliament of the Portuguese Republic, Mr. Peter Ostman, Member of Parliament of Finland, and Jorge Buxade, Member of the Patriots Group from Spain in the European Parliaments. To start off, I would like to invite Mr. Mattias Karlsson, the Member of Parliament from Sweden, and the Chair of Committee of Foreign Affairs. Please.
Thank you very much. And let me start by, on behalf of the Swedish Conservative Movement and my party, the Sweden Democrats, extend my warmest gratitude to our Israeli hosts and to Minister Shikly for inviting us to this very important conference. I think that it's very obvious that European conservatives and Israelis are natural allies. As Mr. Shikly so eloquently put it at our dinner yesterday, the only thing we actually have to do is just to stand up for our respective countries, our traditions, our civilizations, and fighting the worst enemies who are threatening all that. Just by doing that, we are actually helping each other every day because we are fighting the same fight against Islamism and anti-Semitism. When it comes to the Swedish situation, I would argue that one of the most important things that we can do on the right side of politics is to continue to win elections against the left side of politics in Sweden. Let's give me a short snapshot of the Swedish left. We have the Social Democratic Party, the largest party in Sweden. They have for decades been pouring money over the Fatah movement in Palestine, continuously refusing to acknowledge any ties between Fatah and terrorist organizations such as the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigades and others. And they are continuously calling Al-Fatah their beloved sister party, inviting them to Swedish conferences. Then we have the Green Party, who have, by researchers at the Swedish Defence Force Research Institute, been labeled as severely infiltrated by the Muslim Brotherhood. And then we have the former Communist Party, the left party in Sweden, who as late as 2 years ago was discovered that they were using Swedish taxpayers' money to actually fund the terrorist group DFLP in Palestine, one of the terrorist groups that actually took part in the horrific massacre on October 7. And they also put candidates, associates of the DFLP, as candidates for the national election to be elected to the Swedish parliament. You don't have to be a rocket scientist, I guess, to draw the conclusion that these parties will not be the ones who will lead the fight against Islamism and anti-Semitism in Sweden. So it has to be the right side of politics. And fortunately, we won the last election. This government, consisting of the Sweden Democrats and the Liberal Conservatives, have been called the toughest conservative government in modern Swedish history. That means, by international standards, it's a pretty normal, pretty moderate, pretty common sense-based government. But we have been able to make some progress in the fight against Islamism. For example, in the field of education, we have managed to close 22 Islamist schools. There is still one left, unfortunately, in my home city, but I can promise you that I'm working hard on that issue. On civic society, we have been able to completely withdraw funding for the Association of Shia Muslim Congregations, who have been in violation of Swedish equality laws and also promoting Islamist views among the Muslim minorities in Sweden. They used to get many millions of Swedish taxpayers' money. On foreign aid, we have completely abolished the Swedish state-funded aid to UNRWA. We have also completely defunded Islamic Relief, an aid organization with close ties to Hamas. And the former left-wing governments in Sweden were pouring money, billions of Swedish kronor, over these organizations. But we have stopped that, and we will continue to defund every organization who are promoting terrorism and Islamism and attacking also Israel. Of course, the connection between migration and Islamism in our part of the world are direct. The main forces of anti-Semitism and Islamism it comes from migrant groups belonging to the Middle East. And so to be able to address the problem of anti-Semitism and Islamism in Sweden, we have to have a more responsible migration policy. Unfortunately, we are making progress also in that area. This year we saw the lowest numbers of asylum seekers in Sweden's modern history. And in some cases we've also been even succeeded in reversing migration. So when it comes to countries who historically had large numbers of Islamists among the arrivals, such as Somalia, Iraq, Syria, we now have a larger number of people re-migrating to this country than immigrating from these countries to Sweden. So we are reversing the situation. And in the European Parliament, we are trying, together with our European comrades, to lead the fight to defund the Muslim Brotherhood. We want to have the Iranian Revolutionary Guard put up on the European terrorist list. And we are fighting for that. And yes, the other day, our MEPs put forward a suggestion also to ban Al Jazeera in Europe. I think it's only natural that we have banned the state-funded Russian broadcasting companies who are promoting state terrorism. I think there's equivalent in Al Jazeera. It's a terrorist state who are promoting for terrorist organizations. They should not be allowed to work freely in Europe. Sweden Democrats will continue to fight alongside with our friends in combating Islamism and terrorism and anti-Semitism. And hopefully we can, by doing that, we will keep our countries more safe, and we can also help in a little way to keep Europe and Israel more safe as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, when you are the government, you can do many more things.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Mr. Carlson. Congressman Eduardo Bolsonaro of Brazilian National Congress, please.
Sorry about my voice. I got this in the flight coming here. Minister Amihai Shikli, great honor to be here, invited by you, Josh, members of the Knesset. I will read, so I will not be more than 5 minutes. I stand here before you with humility and with pain. On October 7th, the world lost its illusions. Families were burned alive, babies killed, women raped, entire communities erased, not by accident, but by intent. That day, they did not start a war. It revealed a truth many refused to face. This was not resistance. It was genocidal anti-Semitism in its most brutal form. After October 7th, silence was no longer ignorance. Silence became complicity. That's why in October, together with my colleagues from the Foreign Affairs and National Defense Committee in Brazil, I requested and approved a motion condemning Hamas terrorist attacks and expressing solidarity with Israel. This is why legislator matters, because anti-Semitism today does not always wear a swastika. It hides behind NGOs, humanitarian language, and academic jargon, like the word anti-Zionism. My friend Minister Amichai Shikli knows it very well. He played a key role in the extraction of IDF soldier Yuval, a war hero, after the NGO Hind Hajab Foundation, connected to Hezbollah, attempted to have him arrested while on vacations in Brazil. Thank you very much, Minister. Without the information that you provide to me, I would never connect them with Hezbollah. And only because of that, we overturned the narrative going to the press and social media, and the judge was forced to dismiss the case. If lawmakers lack moral clarity and courage, the law itself becomes an accomplice. That's why we have a lot to do. First thing, prevention must come before bloodshed. We must criminalize not only attacks, but preparatory acts, financing, recruitment, and propaganda. If the law reacts only after blue is spilled, the state has already failed. That's why there is no justification for Brazil under the Lula administration to withdraw from the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. We reject Holocaust. Why he rejects Holocaust education in a country with the second largest Jewish community in Latin America? Anyone with a moral compass knows the answer. Second, extremist organizations must be legally designated as terrorist groups. Not only armed groups, but also NGOs that support them. Without designations, banks cannot freeze accounts, courts cannot act, police hesitate. As Sun Tzu taught us, you cannot defeat an enemy you refuse to identify. Third, radical transparency for NGOs. Terror networks abuse humanitarian structure. They use charities, schools, and cultural institutions to launder money and hate. All intelligence services know what happens in the tri-border area between Brazil, Argentina, and Paraguay. And maybe that's why Argentina and Paraguay declared South America's cartels as CV and PCC, as which proven to launder money to Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad as terrorist groups, and Lula da Silva in Brazil didn't. The absence of attacks does not mean absence of terrorists. And from those 3 countries, only one currently refuses full cooperation with the United States under President Trump. Yes, that's Brazil under Lula's administration. Mandatory audits through transparent for foreign funding and zero tolerance for extremist links. Fourth, migration laws that truly integrate. This is not about race or religion. It's about civilizational red lines, respect for the laws, equality between men and women, freedom of religion, and the clear rejection of terrorism. Tolerance, as Karl Popper warned us, cannot be a suicide pact. Fifth, protect the Jewish communities. Synagogues, Jewish schools, and community centers are not symbolic targets. They are operational targets. At Yad Vashem, I learned how the Nazi first mapped Jewish families before murdering them. The law must reflect reality, harsher penalties, permanent police protection, and clear recognition of anti-Semitism as an ideological crime. Going to the end, I end personally. I do not want to be friends with the uncivilized, those who cannot distinguish good from evil. And here's my very rumble but remind that we will be together with Israel, and thank you very much for all the information of Mossad and IDF. Thanks God, I can show it very comfortably, and in some neighborhoods around here, they do not even can look very closely. You know why. You know why. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Congressman Bolsonaro. I think that President Lola is a symbol of socialism connecting to anti-Semitism, basically.
100%.
Yeah.
We will defeat them. My brother, Senator Flavio Bolsonaro, will run for president in October. I ask you for support, him. My father naturally could run,
Good luck.
but he's in jail because of lawfare.
Yeah. And now I invite Monsieur Fabrice Leggeri, member of the Patriots Group from France at the European Parliament. Monsieur Fabrice.
Dear Minister Amichai Shikli, thank you very much for the invitation, and let me also convey to you warm greetings from Jordan Bardella. Honorable members of the Knesset, dear friends. Speaking here within the Knesset is never a trivial act. It is a commitment that carries weight because it takes place in a setting where political responsibility is inseparable from memory and from truth. We are here on the land of Zion, not as an abstraction, but as a historical reality, a land shaped by trial, by fidelity, and by perseverance, a land where the bond between a people, its history, and its sovereignty has never been broken. This duty of truth requires us to look clearly at the situation in Europe and in France. Anti-Semitism is not a residual phenomenon. It does not belong anymore only in the past. It changes its form. It disguises itself, but it remains a constant of hatred. Long racial in nature, it is today largely ideological, and it feeds to a massive extent on political Islamism. France is directly concerned. It is home to the largest Jewish community in Europe and one of the largest Jewish diaspora in the world. Nearly 500,000 Jews live in France. This reality is not marginal. It entails a particular responsibility for the French state. History reminds us of this. France was one of the first countries to emancipate the Jews, beginning with the revolution, and this emancipation was consolidated in the 19th century, notably under the Second Empire of Napoleon III, which confirmed the full and complete integration of Jews into the national community. This history gave rise to a singular and profound relationship between France and the Jews of France. It is still expressed today in the prayer for the Republic, recited in synagogues as a sign of sincere attachment to the French nation. For several years now, anti-Semitism has been rising sharply in France and across Europe, driven primarily by Islamism. This rise is not theoretical. It has a human cost. In France, Jews have been murdered because they were Jews. I'm thinking of Ilyana Halimi, tortured and murdered. I'm thinking of Mireille Knoll, a survivor of the Shoah, killed in her own home. I'm thinking of the children and teachers murdered at the Otara Jewish school. I'm thinking of the victims of the Hyper Cacher attack. Each time, the same pattern emerges. An identified Islamist ideology, warning signs ignored, a judicial response often too slow or insufficiently dissuasive. This reality fuels deep insecurity among French Jews to the point that many consider exile. This pattern reached an extreme level of barbarity on October 7th. the massacre carried out by Hamas and affiliated terrorist organizations was the expression of a genocidal ideology. These groups are not only enemies of Israel. They are enemies of Europe, enemies of France, and enemies of all democratic nations. Remembering October 7 is therefore not only an act of solidarity, it is a duty of memory towards all victims of totalitarian ideologies and Islamist terrorism. This moment also exposed political ambiguities. In France, following the October 7 attacks, a march against anti-Semitism was organized by the presidents of the National Assembly and the Senate. The absence of the President of the Republic was perceived by many French Jews as a missed opportunity to send a clear and unambiguous signal at a decisive moment. And we deeply regret this missed opportunity. Other political leaders chose clarity. In 2024, Jordan Bardella traveled to Israel, visited the sites of Rehim, Netiv HaZahara, and Yad Vashem, and expressed solidarity with the victims of Islamist terrorism. This approach is consistent with the long-standing position of Marine Le Pen, who has repeatedly stated that Islamism is a totalitarian ideology and that fighting anti-Semitism requires firmness and lucidity. This commitment has translated into concrete parliamentary action. In France, a parliamentary inquiry commission has been established to investigate links between political actors and Islamist networks. At the same time, the National Assembly has adopted a resolution calling for the designation of the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization at the European Union level, an initiative supported by French members of the Patriots for Europe. This is where legislative tools become decisive. Islamism is neither a religion nor an opinion. It is a totalitarian ideology, incompatible with the rule of law. Combating it requires naming it clearly, dissolving its relay structures, cutting its funding, and closing the legal grey areas it exploits.
If you can reach the conclusion.
Yeah, we must be lucid about the two structural weaknesses in Europe. First, the financing ecosystem. Terrorist networks and Islamist movements routinely exploit the NGO sector as a vector of influence, fundraising, and legitimacy. Second, the legal asymmetry. European democracies cannot defend themselves if they are systematically prevented from removing dangerous individuals or dismantling networks in time. So finally, Europe must be vigilant about political involvement in activist operations, as this has already been mentioned. And a democracy must also accept the necessity of defending itself, monitoring preachers of hatred in our countries, expelling Islamist foreign nationals, and administratively detaining the most dangerous individuals are not renunciation. They are legitimate tools of protection. So these principles are consistently defended by the Rassemblement National and its representatives in Europe. So France has a particular responsibility towards its Jews. Israel reminds us of an essential truth. There is no freedom without security and no security without political courage. Legislative tools against Islamism do not stigmatize, they protect, they condition the survival of our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Now to Dr. Georgina Teodorescu, member of the ECR group from Romania in the European Parliament. Please share your insights and ideas.
Thank you. Your Excellency, Mr. Minister Amichai Shikli, honorable members of the Knesset, distinguished guests and dear friends, I am deeply honored to have the opportunity to address you in this house of democracy. I come to you from a Europe that is currently navigating through a polycrisis. Multiple global and eternal threats are feeding into one another. It is not just the geopolitical loneliness or the war on our eastern flank, nor the economic or demographic challenge we face. It is more than that. It is the silent enemy that got stronger and stronger over years of political and geopolitical turmoil. It is the anti-Semitic narrative. For decades, the EU relied on a model of integration. Newcomers would naturally adopt EU democratic values. Wrong. Anti-Semitism and radical Islamism ideologies filled the vacuum left by failed social integration. Parallel societies consolidated. Violence, acts of terror, and vandalism are now jeopardizing not just the Jewish values, but the very European way of living. This enemy knows all our vulnerabilities, our rhetoric, our weaknesses, and strikes from within. Our only chance is the Iron Dome, and I'm not speaking of missiles this time, but of laws, education, and unwavering moral clarity. When it comes to combating radical movements, first, we must analyze the position we have on terrorist organizations. Shocking, but only 9 countries of this world have declared so far Hamas to be a terrorist organization. It's Australia, Canada, Ecuador, Israel, of course, Japan, New Zealand, Paraguay, the United Kingdom, the United States, and the European Union. In 2018 and 2023, motions at the United Nations to condemn Hamas as terrorist organization failed to meet the 2/3 threshold. The same situation with Hezbollah, another terrorist organization not recognized by UN. In what concerns the EU, it has declared only the military wing of Hezbollah as being terrorist, while maintaining contact with its political wing. Not to mention the Muslim Brotherhood, which provides significant material support to Hamas. All these organizations are not present only in the Middle East, but also in Europe, and the danger they create affects us all. So I believe the first legal step to fight radical movements is by declaring all these organizations as terrorists in as many countries as possible. And I agree with my colleague MEP Leggeri. Many MEPs from the European Parliament, we submitted a question to the European Commission asking how much do we still have to wait until the European Commission will include the Muslim Brotherhood on the list of terrorist organizations. Second of all, clearly, there is something wrong with the UN. It has become too much political, and I believe it moved away from its original purpose. Therefore, building alternatives to UN, such as the one suggested by President Trump, could make a difference in the future. Also, I believe we should create an alliance of countries to fight terrorism and table in its statute that all members must take steps to declare as terrorist any organization that has been already declared so in the past by at least 3 different countries. Third of all, radicalism must be fought through education and moral values. As long as organizations like UNRWA still finance radical school books in Gaza, there is no hope for the children living there. In one of my visits to Shomron, to my friend Yossi Dagan, who is a hero of Israel, I saw a school calendar from Gaza. On one side there were the days of the calendar, and on the other side the face of a Hamas terrorist holding a gun. How could children grow up differently if they are being taught in school that radical Islam is the only correct way and that they must die by killing infidels? And this takes me to the fourth point, the financing of such organizations. Many of them received money in the past from USAID or from European Union. Unfortunately, the European Union still finances some of them. This means financing future terrorists. By strengthening transparency requirements for NGOs and political organizations, we can expose the influence of foreign actors who seek to destabilize our societies through anti-Semitic rhetoric. And the final point, which is a very important one, fake news can only be fought by real news. Truth always prevails as long as it is allowed and helped to come to the light. Israel suffered a lot in the past years at European level because of the fake news spread and because the reality was not promoted as much as it would have needed to be. National press and TV outlets from Israel should be present more at European level. You need to have English versions of all your good national press so that the whole world can read it. It is not enough to show the truth here in Israel as long as the world receives more fake news than reality. To conclude, the world will be safe only when radical Islam will be eliminated, because unfortunately it represents the main cause for terrorism and therefore for hate against Jews and Christians. Toda Rabba, Am Israel Hai.
Thank you, Dr. Teodorescu. About education, it's not only where Hamas is in Gaza, it's in the West Bank too, in all the school, and even the PA does not like changes in the program, and the program is showing hatred for Jews and for Israel. I invite Mr. Pedro dos Santos Frazão, Member of Parliament of Portuguese Republic.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister, members of the Knesset, distinguished colleagues, and ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to address you today at this respectful house as the Vice President of the second largest political party, Portuguese political party, Chega Party, the only political force in Portugal whose official program clearly and explicitly defends the transference of the Portuguese embassy to Jerusalem and affirms without hesitation the legitimacy, security, and permanence of the State of Israel. I also serve as the chairman of the Portuguese Parliamentary Caucus of the Israel Allies Foundation, which demonstrates my commitment not only in words but in action. History, ladies and gentlemen, is shaped by a permanent struggle between good and evil. And when politics loses the courage to distinguish between these two, it ceases to serve the people. That conviction is why I support Israel, and I always will. I'm driven by a simple but uncomfortable truth. Civilization survives only when it's defended. When political leaders refuse to name evil, they allow it to grow. When they refuse to confront it, they empower it. Today, I want to speak plainly about anti-Semitism in Portugal because it is growing openly, aggressively, and with institutional tolerance. There are no official stats, ladies and gentlemen, not because anti-Semitism doesn't exist, but because Portuguese legal system still refuses to name it properly. Anti-Semitism isn't legally categorized as a specific hate crime. As a result, police forces and courts lack the tool to identify it, to record it, and to prosecute it. What is not named becomes invisible. What is invisible becomes tolerated. Portugal does formally have a national strategy to combat anti-Semitism and promote the Jewish life, aligned also with the European strategy and based on the IRA definition. But let us be honest. A strategy on paper does not protect a single Jewish citizen, and it does not stop a single act of hatred. It does not deter a single aggressive. Despite this strategy, anti-Semitism has become more visible, more aggressive, and more normalized. For an example, a Jewish Portuguese journalist named Esther Musnik was publicly humiliated at a polling station during an election, a national election. She was targeted with anti-Semitic remarks simply because she was a Jewish. This is awful, and it's a stain in our democracy. In Portuguese cities, graffitis glorifying terrorific violence and attacking the Jews and Israel Defense Forces appear repeatedly. And I brought some examples for you. This one is from Lisbon, death to the IDF. This one is also from a city in Portugal, the Star of David with the word blood. This is written in Portuguese. It says, death to the Nazi Zionism. Also this one is in the street of our Portuguese parliament, and it says, Israeli killers are not welcome. And this one is completely appalling. It equals the Star of David with the Nazi cross. So these examples, sirs, must be combated. This month, in January, a sustained campaign of intimidation against a Jewish-owned restaurant in Lisbon of Israeli food culminated in its closure after 10 years of activity. At the same time, slogans, and this was in the news, you can search it on, the restaurant was called Tentura. At the same time, slogans such as "From the river to the sea" have been completely normalized in public demonstrations and political discourse. This slogan represents a refusal to grant Israel what is granted to every other nation, to every other nation the right to exist. The problem, therefore, is historical ignorance and moral cowardice. For this reason, my party has submitted multiple initiatives condemning the resurgence of anti-Semitism and, crucially, a formal resolution urging the Portuguese government to adopt the IRA definition into the domestic law and to fully implement the European strategy. Our party bill is currently awaiting debate in the Portuguese Parliament, but adopting the IRA definition, not only in Portugal but worldwide, is the line between rhetoric and action, between moral posturing and real protection. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Minister, those who target Israel are not fighting a policy. They are fighting the civilization. They are fighting freedom. They are fighting pluralism. They are fighting the moral foundations of the West. And because of that, inaction in the face of anti-Semitism is surrender. Portugal, Europe, and every democracy must now choose where they stand. On my watch, there will be no ambiguity, no hesitation, and no moral fog. I stand with Israel. I stand against anti-Semitism. I stand against cowardice disguised as diplomacy. I call also on every responsible leader in Europe, in the world, to do the same. My beloved Portugal, all European nations, and all democracies in the world must choose where they stand. May God grant us all the wisdom to discern truth from falsehood, the strength to defend what is right, and the courage to uphold freedom, even when it demands sacrifice. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Frazao. And now, Mr. Peter Ostman. Peter, right? Yeah. Peter Ostman, Member of Parliament of Finland. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Minister Amichai Chikli, members of Knesset, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address you today as a representative of the Parliament of Finland. Finland may be a small country, but we place great importance on democracy, human dignity, the rule of law, and the protection of minorities. Today, I wish to briefly address you two urgent issues that concern us all: anti-Semitism and terrorism. Finland has taken a clear stance. Anti-Semitism has no place in our society. Our criminal law prohibits incitement against population groups, including on the basis of religion or ethnicity. Holocaust education is an established part of our national curriculum. Remembering the Holocaust teaches us where hatred and dehumanization can lead if left unchallenged. The Finnish state works closely with the Jewish communities in Finland to promote security, dialogue, and mutual understanding, and practical measures, including police protection of Jewish institutions. Anti-Semitism must be confronted not only nationally, but across borders, with shared standards and shared responsibility. In this spirit, Finland formally adopted the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism in 2022. While it is not a law, it is a practical tool to help authorities, educators, and civil society identify anti-Semitism in its many forms, while safeguarding freedom of expression. We are also strengthening legislation further. A government bill has been submitted to Parliament to explicitly criminalize Holocaust denial and the public denial of other recognized international crimes. Denying historical atrocities, it's not merely an opinion. It fuels hatred and undermines democratic values. Dear friends, at the United Nations, Israel faces a clear, persistent double standard. At the Human Rights Council, it alone is subject to a permanent agenda item and is targeted by far more condemnations than any other country. Friends, this treatment is selective. It's systematic and it's unfair. It goes beyond legitimate criticism and in effect constitutes anti-Semitism regardless of intent. So we must recognize that defending universal standards requires applying them consistently. Isolating one state for perpetual condemnation undermines justice and credibility. The same principle applies in Europe. Policies that indirectly support groups or movements that engage in terrorism against Israel amplify these double standards and further undermine the rule of law. We cannot defend human rights while selectively applying them or tolerating support of violence. Finland condemns terrorism in all its forms without expectation. Our legislation criminalizes the financing, planning and execution of terrorist acts, as well as terrorist propaganda, including online. Finland invests in community-based programs to prevent radicalization, especially among young people. School, social services and local communities are vital in identifying early warning signs and offering support before individuals are drawn into extremism. International cooperation is indispensable. Terrorism does not respect borders, as we have heard here today, and neither can our response. Finland's approach is grounded in a simple but demanding principle: security and human rights must go hand in hand. Anti-Semitism and terrorism and radical Islamism are not abstract issues. They affect people, families, and communities. They erode trust, threaten democracy, and destabilize societies. Finland stands ready to continue working with Israel, with the international community, to confront these challenges together, firmly, responsible, and with respect for human dignity. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Osman. Now the last speaker for this segment will be Mr. Jorge Buxade, member of the Patriots Group from Spain in the European Parliament. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister, for the invitation. Also on behalf of Santiago Abascal, my president and president of Patriots Party, he's campaigning in important elections in Spain. And it is very difficult to speak the last in this panel. And but I want to say clear ideas. First, it is no longer a question of defending. It is a question of reconquering. Hundreds of towns, of cities in Europe are already in the hands of Muslim leaders. Second, Europe cannot wait any longer for its ruling elites to become aware of the situation. We must build new elites. We must be the new elites. Third, main problem is that Islamism is now feeds on closed Muslim communities. Political separatism is growing in the heart of Europe. This political separatism of those who want to live without submitting to the laws passed by national parliaments. We must put end to these parallel societies where education, wealth, statuses of women, security, and shared faith are lived in opposition to the West. Political separatism is found in hundreds of mosques in Spain or in Europe. Combating radical Islamism is not a judicial or legislative question. It's a political question. We cannot combat Islamism if we are not combating also the wokeism. We need to defend, promote, and spread our cultural heritage, our legal culture, our deepest convictions, traditions, and customs. And Israel is the one example of that. There are not many others, maybe Hungary. Only if the state understands that combating Islamism is an existential choice, results will be achieved. Ideas. Legislation that allows for the dissolution of associations, foundations, and companies that jeopardize public order or national security. Legislation that allows for the revocation of nationality of residence permits in our countries. State control of mosques. We need to control what it is said there and who is there. Closure of Salafist and Wahhabist mosques in Europe. Strengthen our borders controls by land, sea, and air. Free movement of people within the Schengen area has become a tool for criminals. We must control this situation. Restrictions on the wearing of the burqa or hijab or other items of clothing. For security reasons, we in Spain, Vox has proposed banning them, not only for security reasons, also for identity reasons. The perpetuation of entire generations of refugee communities in Europe also. The same model for the Palestinian entire generations, refugee, no. Millions of Syrians are in Europe. They have to return to Europe. And the three ideas: return, deportation, re-immigration. Return of all immigrants who have entered or permanent or remain illegally on our national territory. Deportation of those who, after obtaining a residence permit, commit crimes or show through their behavior a rejection of the symbols of our nation, of our civilization. Attacks on Catholic churches or synagogues or Jewish communities should lead to immediate deportation to the country of origin or a third safe country. And re-immigration of all those who live on social assistance, on subsidies, consolidating communities where no one works. Work is not only a way to earn money, it is an appropriate means of participation in the community. And for finish, many things to do, but I think only one is decisive: belief. Believe in ourselves, believe in our people, believe in our nation, and believe on our faith. Believe and fight. Fight, fight. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Bokshadeh. We'll just have a little remark about it. Islam is not the enemy. The radical Islamists are. Those that use Islam for political and terror purposes. I would like to invite Mr. Gadis. I said it right?
Yeah, correct.
Of the European Conservative and Reformist Group from Cyprus in his European Parliament, to present an overview of the geopolitical situation in the Middle East and the Mediterranean, with a focus on Israel, Turkey, Cyprus, and Greece.
Minister of Diaspora, Member of European Parliament, Member of Knesset, Member of National Parliaments, distinguished guests, I would like to thank Mr. Shikli and the Israeli government for this honorary invitation to speak at this conference. It is a special honor for me and for my political party in Cyprus and for my country that a representative from such a small country in the region can address here in Knesset. Cyprus may be a small country in the region, but it has a great geopolitical value and is one of the few countries that can truly understand what Israel is going through, even seeing with its own eyes the attack that Israel has suffered, such as the missile attack by the extremist Islamic regime of Iran. As I have mentioned many times from the official podium of the European Parliament, but also at various summits abroad in which I participate, the Mediterranean is not just a sea, but is a geopolitical hub. It is not a coincidence that its name in Greek is Mesogios, which means middle in the earth. There are countries in the region that seek stability and cooperation, but there are also others that promote instability, with the result that the Middle East is in the flame and the Eastern Mediterranean is facing problems. There are many examples. Who can forget the Hamas terrorist attack on October 7, which left hundreds dead and missing persons? Who can forget the terrorists of the Islamic State and the mass murders of civilians they committed? Who can forget the crimes committed throughout the region by countries and actors involved in the Muslim Brotherhood? I cannot fail to mention with concern and recent releases of ISIS terrorists from prison in northern eastern Syria. And the list is truly enormous. It would take me many hours to mention all the cases. Behind the attacks, there is often a specific country and a man. Turkey and Erdogan, with their allies, which finance and arms terrorist organizations in the region, seeking to turn the entire region into its own Islamic caliphate. That is why it's considered for them Israel and Cyprus as a problem and constantly creates tensions. It has threatened to invade Greece, Cyprus, and Israel on numerous occasions. It does not allow the region to develop blocking projects of common European interest, such as the GSI Great Sea Interconnector electricity cable and the East Med natural gas pipeline, from the rich deposit in exclusive economic zones from Cyprus and Israel. However, I say this with regrets and great disappointment. Although Cyprus is a member of the European Union, but the support it received from Israel is stronger and more significant. The strong friends ties that have developed between the Republic of Cyprus and the State of Israel at the military, strategic, commercial, economic, and humanitarian levels are stronger as the stronger message and the best proof of how much we can achieve. I will conclude with a message to everyone. Cyprus, a European state, may feel the breath of what is called Islamic terrorists, but Israel is in their mouth. We must all understand that Israel's battle against extreme Islam is also our battle. If Israel falls, it's only a matter of few days before Cyprus falls too. Europe, for sure, will follow. So it's now the time to show our support and our solidarity. The issue of Cyprus is also intervened with this, because if Cyprus fails into the hands of Turkey, then Israel will be surrounded and trapped by radical Islamists, and then the Eastern Mediterranean, along with Israel, will be lost. In closing, I want to be absolutely clear. Security, stability, and freedom cannot be taken for granted. Israel, Cyprus, and Greece are the basis of democracy in the region and the most reliable allies of Europe and the USA. When we stand united, we send a message that no extremist and no threat can ignore. That freedom does not retreat, democracy is not blackmailed, and our values are not negotiable. So let's stop those in the European Parliament and national parliament who promoting interests of those who want to destabilize the region, such as Turkey. Let us make clear that the blue and white colors of Greece, Cyprus, and Israel will prevail. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, Mr. Giadis. Before we move on to the next topic, it's my honor to invite Dr. Marek Krajci, a member of the National Council of the Slovak Republic, to deliver a speech titled Israel, the Touchstone of Our Western Societies.
Thank you. Honorable Mr. Minister, members of Parliament from around the world, dear colleagues and friends. It's a great honor to address this assembly today. I speak to you as a member of the Slovak Parliament, but also through the lens of my primary medical profession. In clinical practice, we are used to asking precise questions. What is the nature of the illness? What are the underlying causes? And we know very well that if there is a persistent symptom, such as fever, it signals that there is a deeper, perhaps systemic problem or infection. Today, we are witnessing a disturbing resurgence of anti-Semitism across Europe and North America, on our streets, on our campuses, and increasingly in our institutions. This is not an isolated pathology. It is a diagnostic indicator of a much deeper civilizational crisis. It is an erosion of the moral framework that once shaped our Western societies. Each time hostility toward Jews resurfaces with such intensity, history tells us that something serious is at work. Israel and its people have historically carried this unique but very difficult role, that of a moral touchstone of our societies. Just as the touchstone reveals the purity of God, the world's response to Israel's struggle for its existence serves as the ultimate test of the integrity of our own civilizational values. The foundational ideas that form our civilization, such as human dignity, the sanctity of life, liberty, and compassion with the weak, did not emerge out of nothing. They stem directly and uniquely from our Judeo-Christian heritage that began exactly here in Jerusalem. Once these biblical roots are dismissed as outdated or irrelevant, the very foundation behind our values collapses. We are often told that abandoning these roots would lead to more freedom and progress. Well, history teaches us the opposite. Each time Europe rejected its Judeo-Christian inheritance, it did not produce a more humane society. On the contrary, it produced fascism and communism, ideologies that denied truth, reduced humans to instruments of power, and justified mass violence in the name of utopia. These systems did not fail despite rejecting Judeo-Christian values. They failed exactly because they rejected them. Wow. Today, again, Israel stands as a reminder that moral clarity still matters. A society willing to defend life against terror, truth against propaganda, and justice against brute force inevitably becomes a challenge to those who have lost confidence in their own values. Dear friends, if the free world, including Europe, Slovakia, and Israel, wants to avoid repeating the tragedies of the past, we must recognize the foundation that made our freedom and prosperity possible in the first place. Rediscovering our shared Judeo-Christian heritage is not a retreat into the past. It is an act of intellectual honesty, moral courage, and a strategic resolve for the future. By reconnecting with these life-giving roots, we strengthen the immune system of our societies to resist destructive ideologies and to resist anti-Semitism. I pray and I hope that we will find the courage to choose this path and the strength to walk it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Krejci. As you know, tomorrow is the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, marking the 81st anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz-Birkenau in 1945. At the time which Holocaust denial has become a corrosive tool to incite hatred against the Jewish people and the State of Israel, there is no doubt that one of the most effective instruments in the fight against anti-Semitism is educating future generations about the legacy of the Holocaust and the timeless lesson we must draw from it. The speakers who will present their insight and ideas in this topic are Mr. Christian Terhes, Member of European Parliament Group, Germany, Mr. Tomáš Kubín, Member of the Patriots Group from the Czech Republic and the European Parliament, Mr. Robert Jonathan, I like the Jonathan in it, Sigurtau, Member of the Parliament of Romania, and Mr. Eugenio Zofili, Member of Parliament of Italy. Mr. Terhas, please.
Thank you so much. Teach your children the right path, and when they are old, they will not turn from it. This is one of the verses from the book of Proverbs, chapter 22, verse 6. Minister Šikli, and their colleagues from the European Parliament and many national parliaments. It is a great honor and a great opportunity, I would say, in this context, in this environment, to talk in this panel about the Holocaust education as a main key to combating anti-Semitism. When we talk about education, often we think about just the historical perspective. What happened during the Second World War? Well, if we look historically, the Holocaust did not start with the gas chambers or with pogroms in Eastern Europe. They started with words. When the Nazi government decided to use certain words to poison people's minds and to change and reshape certain realities. Psychology and many communication theories are teaching us today that words are creating realities, and that is true. If you look at the other person, or you relabel the other person not as a human being or an equal human being with you, but a subhuman, then you will find many legal arguments, as we just heard. Why to oppress the person, why to kill the person, and why to pretty much eradicate, or trying to eradicate a whole nation from the face of the earth. So talking about education is very important, especially nowadays, to explain to our younger generations the mistakes of the history, to making sure that those mistakes will not happen in the future. But when we talk about anti-Semitism, we don't talk only about issues and traumas and dramas and horrible things that happened in the past. We also have to talk about issues and realities that are happening today. And my colleague from Romania, Teodorescu, touched base on it. She was mentioning the issue of books used in many of the UNRWA schools today. In 2021 or 22, if I'm not mistaken, I know it was during the pandemic, we had an event in the European Parliament. Josh was there, Yossi Dagan was there, and a few others. And during that event, I found out about a horrific story of Esther Horgan. I hope I pronounced correctly her name.
Mr. Horgan.
She was killed in 2020 while she was jogging. Her father was there and he spoke to us. And he said, that's for the first time when I found out, that in these UNRWA schools, kids are taught that, not only that Jews are, bad and stuff, but they are taught how to kill Jews and how to exercise this kind of terror against Jews. And I was shocked. And I started asking around and I said, man, is this true? I want to see such a book. And people looked at me and said, well, we heard about this, but we haven't seen a book. Well, thanks to Josh here, he's doing a great job with Israel Allies Foundation, creating these caucuses all across Europe and pretty much across the globe, because it's giving us the opportunity to meet a lot of like-minded lawmakers. So this is, as I said, in one of these environments, I met Yossi Dagan. In 2023, a month before the horrible attack, I was in Israel, end of August, beginning of September. And I found such a book. And since then, I keep showing this book in the European Parliament, and when I started showing this book, initially they cut my mic. So what you see here, this is a literature book used in UNRWA schools. Kids are not born terrorists. They're educated, indoctrinated to be terrorists. So imagine in this literature book for the 5th grade, one of the images presented to these kids, Arab kids, great kids, with great potential. This is one of the pictures that they see. If you are not aware who she is, let me read 2 paragraphs. Dalal al-Mughrabi, born 1959, was a Palestinian terrorist who on March 11, 1978, along with other terrorists, landed on the coast of Tel Aviv and murdered a Jewish person who was taking pictures at the beach. They went on and hijacked a taxi cab and killed the passengers and drove to Tel Aviv. On their way, they opened fire at the passing traffic. In Tel Aviv, they hijacked a bus full of people and then another one and moved the people from one bus to another, and when the Israeli authorities tried to free the people, they blew themselves up. A total of 38 Israelis, along with 13 children, were killed and 72 were wounded. Now, I don't read Arabic. I asked many people who read to translate what this text says right here, and I will read it for you. Our Palestinian history celebrates many martyrs who sacrificed their lives for the homeland, including Dalal al-Mughrabi, who drew a picture of heroism and confrontation and made her memory stay alive in our hearts and minds. When I raised this issue 2-3 months ago in the committee, the budgetary control committee, because you were talking about money as well, in the European Parliament, I'm the second vice chair of that committee. Someone from the left said, oh my God, people are killed in Gaza and we talk about books? Exactly. Because the question is, how come? You know, we got to the point where we saw those horrific things, and they start from education. And nevertheless, they start from words. He who framed the argument wins the debate. And if the Bible is teaching us that at the beginning, God created the light just by saying, let it be light. We all agree here there is a lot of darkness in the world. But I think it's our job to make sure that we bring a little bit of light, if not more light, you know, by using the proper words, condemning the evil, and making sure that people know the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Terres. A great example. And I think now there is maybe a chance for a change in that issue for Palestinian kids. As you mentioned, they are not born terrorists. I invite Mr. Tomáš Kubin, member of the Patriots Group from the Czech Republic in the European Parliament.
כבוד אדוני שר שיקלי, חבר יקר עמיחי, honorable members of Parliament, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, after the excellent speech of my colleague Christian, I will now step down a little bit and I will turn back from the Middle East to Europe. I'm very glad that I can speak about education because that's what I'm doing since I think 20 years already in the schools and in universities. We are here to discuss Holocaust education as a key combating anti-Semitism, but I want to argue that this is not just a key, it is the main key, but only if we understand what true education means. You know, the European mindset toward Jews and Holocaust and anti-Semitism is dangerously fragile. Europeans often mistake philo-Semitism, people weeping over movies or dancing to Havana Gila, for solid foundation, but it is not. Emotions can swing from affection to hatred in an instant under the weight of propaganda. My friend who was Nitzol Shoah, the Holocaust survivor, once told me it's hard to listen to it. Europeans like dead Jews because they can cry over us. Nothing is worse for us than excessive affection. I think I remembered his words exactly. And this is why education, real education matters. Not education that produces tears, but education that produces understanding. Nevertheless, much of what passes for Holocaust education today fails. Romanticized stories like the boy in striped pajama or tattoos of Auschwitz offer a comfortable version of horror designed to make audience sigh, not think. They replace history with sentiment. The problem is not that people feel. The problem is that feeling is all they have. When emotion is the only anchor, it drifts easily. A person who knows, in quotes, the Holocaust only through tears has no defense against lies. AI-generated fake photos, twisted statistics, false narratives flooding social media. Even though, by the way, the Auschwitz Museum protests against this in vain, and we should not be surprised. We have given people sympathy without structure, emotions without understanding, and that is not the education, I call it, that's vulnerability. True Holocaust education must build a hard shell, an armor of facts that protects against lies. This applies to school children, but equally to adults. We all need this armor. And what does it look like? I, for example, teach the mechanism. How a modern state, step by step, stripped citizens of their rights, then their property, then their dignity, and finally their lives. How office workers managed genocide with the same tools they used to manage railways and collect taxes. How industrial logic was applied to murder. This is not about creating horror. It is about creating understanding. When people grasp the system, they can recognize its early signs. They become resistant to those who say it was not possible from a particular point of view, or the numbers are exaggerated. Holocaust education is not about schools only. It must be educated everywhere, in public debate, in medias, between us, politics as well. It's not about the history, but the mechanism, how ordinary paperwork enabled genocide, how propaganda works, how indifference kills. But, it's a message for us all, education requires courage. It means facing anti-Semitism wherever it comes from, including from groups we find difficult to criticize, as nowadays in Europe. It means choosing truth over comfort, facts over polls. 90 years ago, Europe failed tragically. Today we face a different test, wherever we have the courage to educate and to be educated without looking away. My Shoah survivor friend understood that sentiment offers no protection, only through us. Let us commit to Holocaust education that builds armor, not tears. That is the key we hold, and let us have the courage to turn it. And at the end, I would like just to have a message. In about 2 months, we will read Haggadah again on Pesach. And just remember for Piyut Vehishamda, I will translate, for not only one enemy has risen up against us to destroy us, but in every generation they rise up to destroy us. But the Holy One, blessed be He, delivers us from their hands. Amen. But we should help Him.
Amen.
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 Thank you, Mr. Corbin. And now, Mr. Robert Jonathan Siguartao, member of the Romanian Parliament. Please share a speech with us.
Mr. Minister, dear Josh, ladies and gentlemen, as a member of the Romanian Parliament and chair of the Romanian-Israel Caucus, I stand before you today as someone who comes from a country shaped by the consequences of a totalitarian regime. The Holocaust was not an accident of history. It was the result of a system that transformed hatred into policy and dehumanization into law. Today, anti-Semitism is once again present not in uniforms or laws, but in memes, conspiracy theories, and distorted history presented on the online platforms. Unfortunately, is not fueled only by the leftist parties, but also by new movements from the right spectrum. In Romania, we know what happens when truth is manipulated and ideology replaces human dignity. After the World War II, my country fell under a communist regime that ruled through fear, censorship, and repression. History was rewritten, crimes were denied, victims were silenced. Entire generations were educated not to question, not to remember, and not to think critically. The mechanisms were different back then, but the lesson remained the same. When education becomes an ideological tool instead of truth, society becomes vulnerable to injustice. Today, anti-Semitism in Western world is once again growing, especially among young people. But it no longer wears the face of state ideology. It spreads through social media as conspiracy theories and historical distortion. Young people encounter Holocaust denial and hatred online, in many cases without the knowledge or tools to challenge it. Holocaust education is one of the strongest defenses we have right now against this phenomenon. It teaches how language leads to violence, how bureaucracy can become an instrument of murder, and it demonstrates how ordinary people can become complicit when they stop questioning authority. Today, Holocaust education is included in Romanian high schools as distinct subject. This decision was taken as a collective responsibility because democracy are not built on forgetting, they are built on truth. Our experience with communism has taught us something essential. Memory is a form of resistance. I believe that the fight against anti-Semitism cannot rely only on security measures, laws, or condemnation after attacks. It must begin more earlier in classrooms and in the moral education of the youth. As a member of the Romanian Parliament coming from a country that knows the cost of totalitarian repression, I reaffirm my commitment to Holocaust education as a moral and political necessity in every and each democracy. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. To conclude the discussion on education, I would like to invite Mr. Eugenio Zoffili, Member of Parliament from Italy.
Thank you, Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. First of all, let me thank Mr. Shikly for this kind invitation. I'm proud to be here. It's a great honor for me to speak here in Jerusalem, the holy city of the great monotheistic religions and the heart of the state of Israel, the only democracy in the Middle East, strong and proud of its identity, wounded but not broken by the barbarity of 7 October. Here, let me express my deepest prayer, my deepest solidarity to the people of Israel, a nation that is both ancient and young because it was born immediately after the greatest tragedy of 20th century, the Holocaust, whose evil roots are still alive. Today we can see clear signs of rebirth of anti-Semitism. We see verbal and physical attacks, symbols of hate reappearing in public places, desecrated cemeteries, threats to schools and synagogues. We are worried about the fast dissemination of anti-Semitic propaganda online. Every time we normalize prejudice, we help violence to spread. So what can we do? What can parliaments concretely do against this threat? I think there are 4 possible lines of action. Number 1, effective and enforced laws. Rules on paper are not enough. Hate crime is never just another incident. It's an attack on the entire society. Number 2, protection, prevention and memory, especially thanks to education. Education is not an option. It's the primary tool of democratic security. But remembering the Holocaust cannot confine to history books. It must be a daily effort. Number 3, accountability of digital platforms. We must demand transparency on algorithms, rapid procedures for removing content that incites violence, cooperation with the authorities and protection of freedom of information without transforming it into a license for persecution. Technology is not always neutral. Number 4, institutional unity and public discourse. Parliaments and the entire political spectrum play a fundamental role. They must serve as an example because words matter. Words can disarm hate or legitimize it. Anti-Semitism is a crucial topic for the Italian Parliament, which is committed to combating it both from a political and legislative point of view. Zero tolerance in this regard is a common goal. In 2000, an Italian law instituted the Holocaust Memorial Day on 27th of January, the day when the gates of Auschwitz were broken down in order to commemorate the extermination of the Jewish people. Anti-Semitism is a matter of primary importance, not just for the Italian Parliament, but also for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, of which I'm proud to be Vice President. In the OSCE, I firmly condemned all forms of anti-Semitism, and I also invited all the colleagues and other prominent people to speak out clearly against all forms of racism against the Jewish people. When anti-Semitism grows, it does not only target the Jewish, it affects everyone's liberty. But behind anti-Semitism often lies an even more insidious, die-hard enemy, anti-Zionism, which translates into a negation of Israel's right to exist and a Jewish state. Our duty is not only to react to incidents, but to prevent hate from becoming normality. We must be clear, no ambiguity, no indulgence. Today, here, we can say seriously that we will not allow the anti-Semitism to reemerge, not only to remember the past, but also to ensure a better future. We must continue, Minister Chair, to work together against anti-Semitism, to work together for the peace. And, Chair, Minister, I'm one of the Liga MPs who displayed the Israeli flag in the Italian Chamber of Deputies in 2021. We will always stand with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Zofili. I would like to invite Dr. Ruben Baumgarten, member of the Senate of the Netherlands, to present an important overview on anti-Semitism in the Netherlands before and after October 7th, 2023.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, Excellency, dear colleagues. After the Second World War, Jews in the Netherlands experienced a period of relative calm. What remained of a traumatized Jewish population helped rebuild the country and revive their own communities. My father was among them. He laid the first brick of a new synagogue in The Hague, modest in size, yet sufficient for a community that had been decimated. From the 1960s onward, in particular, anti-Semitism appeared to have no place in Dutch society. Its expressions were not tolerated, and Frank became a moral symbol. After 1945, life for Jews wasn't perfect, but in the West, it was better than it had been before, perhaps better than ever. In those years, my father repeatedly warned me, and he mentioned Jews are simply tolerated, but will never be fully accepted. I didn't understand his distrust, I didn't feel it, and I refused to accept it. I even pushed back against it because I felt safe and accepted in the Netherlands. Looking back, there was a world in which Jewish identity was considered harmless, provided the Jew fitted the preferred mold. In this world, the good Jew suffers quietly and absorbs the blows. The bad Jew is strong and dares to respond. The world after October 7th is marked by unchecked anti-Semitism and by the expectation that Jews must simply endure this. In the spring of 2024, at the opening of the Holocaust Museum in Amsterdam, once affectionately known as the Jerusalem of the West, so-called demonstrators screamed abuse at Jewish women, children and men from just a few meters away. This was justified as the right to protest. The intimidation of Jews, the specific targeting of Jews, was treated as a secondary concern. Only recently, a court ruled that a pro-Gaza demonstration could take place alongside a children's concert celebrating Hanukkah at the Concertgebouw in Amsterdam. Jewish children had gathered there to celebrate a religious festival unrelated to Israel. Nevertheless, activists were allowed to display signs comparing Gaza to Auschwitz, while demonstrators attempted to force their way into the building. All of it potentially justified under the banner of the rule of law. There are many such examples. Now I understand what my father meant. The Netherlands, which once felt like home, increasingly feels like a strange hotel, a place where we appear to be even more unwelcome guests. Many Jews today feel exposed and unprotected, insufficiently supported by a legal order that suspiciously often seems to take a particular side. Mr. Moderator, I stand here as a Dutch senator, one of 75, and I'm proud of that and I'm grateful for it. I'm also the chairman for the Israel Allies Foundation in the Dutch Senate. My family's journey was long, and I spoke these following words in the Senate during my maiden speech in June 2023, and I quote, "It is extraordinary to be able to call myself a member of the Senate. Only one generation ago, my grandparents and my father, stateless and fleeing persecution, found a safe haven in the Netherlands. After the Second World War in 1948, their application for naturalization was granted by law in this chamber. Coincidence or not, there's a legal act from that same year named after my grandfather, Naftullah Baumgarten, of the first alphabetically of 20 applicants and their families to be naturalized by Dutch law as Dutch citizens." End of quote. I didn't speak those words merely to express the gratitude that anyone serving in the Senate ought to feel. I also wish to underline continuity. Continuity that some believed was never intended, yet was nevertheless endured. However, according to some, I'm now at least complicit in the murder of children, in crimes against humanity, in the destruction of Gaza. Why? First, because I'm Jewish. Second, because I believe that Jews have the right to a state of their own. For a long time, I didn't consider myself a full-blown Zionist. Regrettably, I now see the need for a strong Jewish state. The way Jews are treated today in the Netherlands and in other Western countries is writing on the wall. And when I see how Israel is treated, I cannot look away. Jews are expected to remain victims. The Jewish state is expected to absorb and suffer. When Israel responds after an unspeakable pogrom, attention immediately shifts to the victims of Jewish actions. On the very evening of October 7, Dutch media were already speculating about how Israel's enemies would suffer disproportionately once the IDF would respond. This mindset is widespread in universities, in media, and across many institutions. Anti-Israeli and anti-Semitic rhetoric is loud, activist-driven, and often detached from historical reality and moral clarity. It has tangible consequences in the Netherlands. Legal limits are not properly enforced out of fear of accusation of discrimination or in the name of de-escalation, even when a law is clearly broken. And yet I remain hopeful. Solidarity among Jews and between Jews and Christians is stronger than it has been in decades. Jewish communities are growing. The influence of anti-Israel and anti-Semitic activists appear to be waning, but only until Israel has to defend itself again against Islamic terror. Increasingly, the activists are exposed for what they are: anti-Semitic, anti-Western, hostile to civilization itself, often influenced or even funded by dubious states with deep pockets. Our friends, Christians and conservatives, liberals and others, refuse to follow this agenda, not because they fear becoming the next targets, but because they remain committed to what was once solemnly vowed: nie wieder, never again. Above all, because they are still able to tell right from wrong. That gives us strength and hope. Somehow, I still want to believe that Jews are more than merely tolerated. I continue to hope that my father was wrong in his view. We Jews may have more enemies than others, but we are strong and also have many friends. Let us not forget that. Mr. Moderator, thank you.
Thank you. Many friends indeed, as you can see here. Before we move on to the third and final topic, I would like to invite Mr. Herman Tertsch, Vice Chair of the Patriots of Europe group in the European Parliament, to speak about the political use of anti-Semitism, the Socialism-Islamism alliance.
So first of all, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. It's a great honor. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, dear friend, Cmikhail, for this conference, which is really an important moment that has become regular and has to be systematic. Thank you very much, everybody. The monstrous Islamic terrorist action on the 7th of October brought days of compassion for the Jewish victims, but immediately years of anti-Semitic passion against Israel. Western societies have been deeply shaken by the images of the past 2 years, where the streets of their cities have been invaded and controlled. These concepts are important, by huge crowds of highly mobilized militant anti-Semites and Israel haters. Suddenly we saw our very crude reality. As we have always seen, the ridiculous excuse of anti-Zionism is not the anti-Semitism was radically refuted by the actions of socialist, Islamist, and far too many governments. They began by asking Israel not to defend itself and soon passed to demanding Palestine from the river to the sea, included as Spanish members of the Spanish government, which means genocide. They are now calling for reprisals against Jews for being Jews. Again, in the whole West, boycott to Jews, Kauf nicht bei Deutschen, which is an enormous, don't buy at Jews businesses. That was a slogan in the 30s in Germany. It has become a slogan now with the boycott to Israel products. The composition of this crowd was the same in New York, in Chicago, in Rome, Madrid, London, Berlin, and Brussels. Native leftist parties and forces joined by Muslim communities. In many cities, these two forces chanted slogans against Israel, against the US, against fascism, and against the West as a whole. Frequently, one could see Hezbollah and Hamas flags on slogans of the Muslim Brotherhood alongside young and white students carrying LGTB flags. Everybody here knows that the latter group would not survive a day in a Muslim Brotherhood-controlled neighborhood in the Middle East. For many in the West, this alliance of socialism and Islamism under the umbrella of anti-Semitism appears to be a new phenomenon. In fact, it has a long story and a strong common ground. One does not even have to go to the way back to the alliance between the Grand Mufti and the National Socialist, the Nazi movement in Germany and elsewhere in the 30s. This century began with a very active mobilization of this socialist-Islamist alliance. The main actors were the Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, both close allies of the Spanish socialists. Their close cooperation later expanded to Evo Morales in Bolivia, Correa in Ecuador, Kirchner in Argentina, and of course Cuba, was the reason for the deep penetration of Iran and Hezbollah into the Ibero-American subcontinent. Prior to this, Iran had already engaged in terrorist activities, specifically in the two major tragic bombings of the Israeli embassy and the AMIA in Buenos Aires. However, these activities rapidly expanded into drug trafficking and money laundering in the whole South American continent, and with the drug dealing to Europe and to the United States. Before that, Ilich Ramirez Sanchez, the notorious terrorist known as Carlos the Jackal, wrote about the necessary strategic anti-imperialist alliance between socialism and Islamism. Later, Spanish communists such as Jorge Berstrique, Juan Carlos Monedero, and Pablo Iglesias, who became vice president in the government of Pedro Sanchez, elaborated this concept. A few words are necessary regarding the disgrace in my own country, where socialists like Rodríguez Zapatero, who was the former prime minister socialist, who founded the alliance of civilizations with Iran and Turkey, and now Pedro Sánchez, having made anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Western and pro-Islamist policies almost a matter of state, the raison d'etat. Today, Pedro Sánchez, a leader of government which is mired in immense corruption, is the most aggressive enemy of Israel in Europe, but he's also the enemy of the Spanish nation. He operates in alliance with separatists, organized crime from the Venezuelan dictatorship, Islamists from Iran, and the entire Foro de Sao Paulo, where leftist, communist, and terrorist groups mingle with the drug cartels, and the huge network of NGOs, which have expanded this kind of anti-Jewish and anti-Israel activity all over the world. Only Keir Starmer in Britain could be seen as reaching a similar level of active hostility in Europe towards his own people and permanent complicity with an Islamic invasion in Europe, as we are witnessing, an invasion that is becoming every day more assertive and aggressive. The primary reason the Western left seeks this alliance with the greatest enemies of Israel is their ideology, what they call their anti-imperialist ideology and anti-Western phobia. But at the core of this colossal attempt to delegitimize Israel is the left need to attack any nation that defends itself, its territory and its identity. The destruction of the nation, the family, the traditions, the values and virtues is the main goal of today's international globalist woke left, which is increasingly radicalized due to the complete failure of the traditional left in every practical sense. And they are against nation, against family, against religion, against freedom, against the traditions, as I said, values, and they are against Israel because Israel represents it. Israel serves as an example for the West in resistance, resilience, and the fight for national survival and a fortified identity. That is why the enemies of freedom and truth hate the Jewish people and Israel so intensely. And that is why we patriots who fight in the West to reconquer sovereignty and defend our identity, values, virtues, and civilization see Israel as an example. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tresch. Now I will move to our third topic, responses and legislation to prevent foreign political interference, which will be addressed by Judge Alan Clemons, Judge of South Carolina Circuit Court and the founder of the American Patriots for Israel. Judge.
Thank you very much. It is indeed an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you, Minister Shikly, for giving me the opportunity of being a part of this important event this day. As I look around and I see many friends and colleagues that through whom we became friends through the Israel Allies Foundation, Josh Weinstein. So Josh, let me thank you for connecting me with these fine friends. Thank you for your efforts, each and every one of you. I believe that I'm the only retired legislator on the panel. I call myself a recovering legislator. So for each of you, thank you for your efforts in defending truth, for being warriors of truth within your own countries. I would like to also say what an honor it is to be back here in the Knesset, the seat of government of the one and only Jewish nation. I'm here because of my love and my respect for the Jewish people. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and my Christianity drives me and informs me in my support for the Jewish people. And secondly, as a proud American, in my view, support for Israel is a point of American patriotism. Now, the question to be answered today is what must be done to defeat anti-Semitism around the world? I spent the better part of 2 decades as a legislator making laws from my home state of South Carolina. I've been called one of the most effective legislators in the United States, but my answer isn't in making new laws. I've been a lawyer for 35 years and now serve as a judge. My answer is rooted in international law. I'm going to suggest the same answer to this question that I gave in my keynote address to the International Legal Forum Conference held here in Jerusalem some 8 years ago. I said then, the goal of defeating anti-Semitism demands a higher level of moral clarity and truth. The very beating heart of modern anti-Semitism is the lie of occupation. Occupation in Israel, in Judea, in Samaria. Having studied the legal issue extensively, I suggest that the bottom line is that occupation is a legal term whose definition does not apply to Israel under the law. Nevertheless, the term is intentionally misused against Israel in order to shape negative misperceptions of her history and her legitimacy, while perpetuating a sense of Palestinian Arab victimhood. In this context, occupier is nothing more than a polite way of calling Israel a thief, suggesting that Jewish invaders colonized territory belonging to the Arabs, and which therefore must be restored to its rightful victimized owners. The term also gives Israel's enemies a way to try to explain away violence and terrorism as merely resistance to occupation. Given the negative connotation of the term occupier, anti-Semitic groups use the word as often as possible in their messaging as they carry out acts of political and economic warfare upon Israel and her supporters. This then leads to the term's casual repetition by the media, on social media, and its eventual use by policymakers. Thus, it is clear that promoting the common misrepresentation of the Jewish state of Israel as an occupier in the land of Israel has become the primary anti-Semitic canard of the present generation. Esteemed Minister Shikly, honorable members of the Knesset, it's my humble opinion that turning the tide of occupation-based fantasy that ignites anti-Semitism starts with the policy and the laws of this nation. But it does not stop there. We all recognize that many youthful converts have been recruited to the ideology war against Israel through imaginative yet deceitful social media manipulation based in the fiction of occupation. I believe that the right messaging through social media in content and volume could prove to be Israel's most effective weapon in the war against anti-Semitism. While well-meaning organizations like my own American Patriots for Israel cannot carry that burden alone, we can and will certainly stand with the Jewish nation in amplifying your message. In closing, I want to thank you and bless you all for all that you do, and assure you that there are millions of other Christians like myself who love Israel and will fight for her. Most importantly, do not fear, because God is always here for his beloved Zion. Wow. Thank you very much. Am Israel Chai.
Thank you, Judge Clemens. And thank you for all our speakers for a kaleidoscope of insight, inspiration, and above all, solidarity. Now I'd like to open the discussion to the members of Knesset who has joined us this morning. And first one, Member of Knesset Simcha Rotman, the head of Judicial Committee.
Good morning, everyone, and I'm sorry I have to be quick because I have to return to my committee, but I want to thank Minister Shikli and everyone who was involved in making all of those events. It's few series of events about fighting anti-Semitism, and I want to be very, again, very clear and very short. We need to fight anti-Semitism because we need to fight for the truth against the lies. And it's not by coincidence that the anti-Semites around the world, the first thing that they attack is the IRA definition, because the IRA definition of anti-Semitism just say that applying double standards to Israel is anti-Semitism. And that's why they fight it. Because if you take double standards away from anti-Semites, they have nothing to stand on. Just see what happened in Iran in a day. In a day, they killed more civilians than what Israel allegedly did in 2 years of fighting in the most hard environment for having a battle. Everyone is quiet. Did you see the encampment in the campuses? Did you see all the people talk about it? No, because applying double standards and lying about Israel is the easy go-to for anti-Semites worldwide. And this is why adopting IRA definition is a very important step for anyone who wants to fight anti-Semitism. But the second important step is to just say the truth. This is why I'm the head of the Judiciary Committee here in the Knesset, but I also led 2 resolutions of the Knesset that both enjoyed 2/3 of the Knesset support. One saying that the Palestinian state equals the end of the state of Israel, and we have to fight it because it's an imminent threat to the existence of the state of Israel. We had the support of 80 Knesset members to this resolution, and a resolution saying Israel should apply sovereignty over Judea and Samaria because this is our land. In the Bible it says, Emet me'eretz titzmach. The truth comes from the land. So if we speak truth about the land of God, we will see the truth all around the world about the people of God and about the ways to attack and to fight those who wants to destroy the land and the people. Thank you very much for coming from all over the world for this important mission. Thank you again, Minister Shikli, for bringing them all, and God bless you all. Thank you very much.
And now member of Knesset, Ohad Tal. Is he here?
לא כאן. יש פה את...
לא כאן. member of Knesset, Kalner, of course.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Shikli, for arranging this event. Thank you, dear friends. I see here many friends from the last year. I met last years. I knew in the last years brave people, brave men with and women with moral clarity. And standing with us, with Israel, with the Jewish people, and standing for the truth, and standing for the Western civilization, because those who threaten the Jewish people and Israel threaten the Western civilization. Basically, they threaten any civilization. This barbarism is a threat on each and every civilization, and it's very, very important to stand together because this is the fight for not for the legacy of the previous generations, but for the future of the next generations, and it's very, very important to stand together. And I would add another thing about Judea and Samaria, about the fighting for this land against the lies, against the delegitimization of Israel. The question is if Judea and Samaria and this land and Jerusalem will be as it was the Bible land or the Sharia land. This is the question. And if, God forbid, it will be Sharia land, this is not a threat only on the Jewish people and on Israel. We will be, of course, the first in the line, as it was with the Palestinian state that we met in Gaza. It was a state. But we will be in the first in the line, but this threat will be on the whole Western civilization. And this is why standing with Israel and standing for the Jewish communities, with the Jewish communities, defending them all over the world, who are also threatened by this barbarism, is protecting and defending the Western civilization, our civilization. Thank you very much for being here with us, and thank you for all your commitment and actions. Thank you.
One of the most achievable Knesset members we have. As always, time flies. 1 o'clock. Probably all of you are hungry. I'm privileged to be your host today. We will soon close the session here, have lunch, and then visit Tower of David. Please note that participation in the tour is restricted to selected participants. Before I leave you, I would like to thank Minister Amichai Shikli. Thank you. I think he deserves. Galit Wahaba Shasho in her team in the Prime Minister's Office Ceremonial Directorate. ProMarket for an outstanding production here. Our gracious host, the Knesset, of course, Amir Oוחנה, who was here, the Speaker of the Knesset, and of course, especially for you. And last little announcement, they asked me to say that the members of the Parliament and speakers participant at the Knesset plenary are kindly invited to lunch hosted by the Minister Amichai Shikli. Please note the attendance of the Minister's lunch is restricted to speakers and Parliament members only. The other staff members are invited to have lunch at the auditorium. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a pleasant
Thanks so
stay.
much, everyone.